This conference will now be recorded.
Yes. So, what's up, man?
Not much. How you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Good to meet you.
Good to meet
Meet
you
you.
as well. Thanks for
Yeah.
reaching out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely obviously want to touch base as far as from a student athlete standpoint, but obviously you have a another expertise that I certainly want to tap into as well. Certainly either as time permits or later, depending on how this goes. But yeah. So, are you? How are things going? Are you working from home? Are you at the
Yeah.
office or what?
Nope, I've been working from home pretty steadily for the last 2 months or so. Our firm has kind of been back and forth on work from home policy. So yeah, since about Thanksgiving, I've been working from home, which we just moved into a new house, so it's been nice to be able to be around for all of that, and also it's good to stay, to lay low and stay safe as best you can. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now you're from Salina or no?
I'm from Abilene, right there east of Savannah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my wife is from Salina originally, and so I spent a lot
Ooh.
of time obviously passing Abilene quite a bit. Um,
Yeah, yeah. So is she a South or Central girl?
I get this wrong. Every time I run into someone from Salina, they ask
Yeah.
me that question. I think it's South
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Central.
It's not that important to me, but I know for the folks in Salina, that's a big deal. So
Those are fighting words if I say the wrong thing, right?
sure, for sure.
Yeah. So her brother actually he played at KU as well. Then one of it. So I mean, I know KU and K State obviously have a pipeline to Salina, Kansas.
Yeah.
So
All places.
small world. All right. Well, let me go ahead and jump into it and kind of hit my little intro here. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Pat Brown. I'm a financial advisor with Edmonds Duncan out of Lawrence, Kansas. Played football for the University of Kansas a number of years ago, a long time ago. Played outside linebacker, started for 3 years, was a team captain. I say all that said, just really enjoyed my time at the University of Kansas and met a lot of great people and became very passionate about financial literacy for student athletes. And that has more or less led me down this path of interviewing former student athletes with the hopes that current student athletes can learn from their successes and failures to form better habits dealing with financial matters. Um, I want to also read just the definition of financial literacy because I think a lot of guys have the wrong connotation about it. Financial literacy is the possession of a set of skills and knowledge that allows an individual to make informed and effective decisions with all their financial resources. And again, I kind of alluded to it, but I think a lot of guys, once they hear that word literacy and financial, they think, well, I'm not the smartest guy around or smartest young lady around. So that's not the case. Obviously, as a student athlete, you have a unique set of skills and habits that you form. And I think those habits can correlate with developing habits for financial literacy. So, having said that, I certainly want to introduce my guest. Feels strange saying it, but Curry Sexton played football at the University of or State. Let me back up because it's tough for me to say that. But Kansas State University, K State, mortal enemy of KU, but he's been gracious enough to take some time and share some of his thoughts on what his ideas on money is. And again, I mentioned earlier, he has another expertise just dealing with a lot of things coming down the pipe with name, image, and likeness. So, man, welcome again. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, Pat, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to talk, student athletes and student athlete wellness. Um, Financial literacy is it's obviously something that probably isn't discussed enough
Mhm.
at the collegiate level. And so again, I'm a huge proponent of the student athlete and their well-being. And so anything I can do to help, I'm absolutely here for.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, if we kind of go backwards, looking at your freshman and sophomore year, kind of what were your thoughts on money, budgeting, credit? Was this something that your folks talked to you about? Or was it something that anybody talked about at the university?
So as far as credit, no. I mean, as an 18 or 19-year-old, I knew nothing about credit. I never had a credit card. It was always kind of a foreign subject to me. Um, I was blessed with parents who taught me to value money. And my mom, growing up, my family didn't have a ton. And so she became a Dave Ramsey follower when I was really young. And so, she's always stressed the importance of, don't spend what you don't have. If you can't buy
Yeah.
something in cash, don't buy it. And so in college, that was always kind of my approach is, well, whatever I have is what I can spend and nothing more. Now that's obviously good and bad, because you shouldn't necessarily spend what you have. I mean, obviously there's limits there, but
Sure.
that's really what I knew about money as a young student athlete at K-State. I knew that I had a certain amount coming in each month, and that my expenses needed to stay under that amount. I didn't learn about credit until going into my senior year. My mom encouraged me to open up a credit card account, so I could start building some credit, knowing that I
Yeah.
was going into the real world soon, would probably need to make a big purchase in due time. And even then I was certainly a novice. And so it's not something that I remember being talked about much at K-State, and something that I wish would have been discussed more, if I had to say.
Yeah. No, I definitely hear you there. I don't know how it was at K-State, but at, KU, there was like literally some type of station almost periodically throughout campus, hey, here's a free T-shirt, just fill out this information to get a credit card. And, I learned by just trial and error. I mean, I went
Mhm.
up there, got my free T-shirt and pack of Skittles, and literally just didn't understand it. Just kind of like what you said, just didn't understand it. So it's one of those things I wish someone definitely had kind of taken me to the side and at least explain some things to me.
Absolutely. I mean, I think from to an extent, most guys go to college, and the scholarship check is essentially the first, real form of payment or income that they've ever received. And
Hmm.
so, I don't know what it was when you were at KU. It wasn't a lot when I was at K-State. It has since they removed the caps, for cost of attendance, that the amounts have grown by a pretty substantial amount.
Yeah.
So, I was always of the belief that guys thought that they were balling. I mean, guys thought that scholarship check was something serious, and that was often to a lot of our detriment. It was,
Yeah.
we were spending like we had something. In reality, we didn't. And so, like you said, I wish that financial literacy would have been something that was discussed as much as many other important items.
Yeah, no doubt. So when you kind of look back, how were you making your decisions about money? Was it kind of a trial and error thing? I mean, was it obviously you spent too much one weekend and didn't have enough for later? And I know you mentioned before that you had kind of more of a foundation with your folks, but did you ever run into that at all? Or
Yeah, I mean, so I had a really weird system in college. Back then, like I said, I didn't have a credit card. I had a debit card, but I didn't like to use it. I was the kind of guy that if we went out to Aggieville, I was the kind of guy who had no hesitation in opening a tab and loading it up. Uh, for better or for worse. There were some good
yeah,
times had, but that next morning could get kind of scary. So I was the kind of guy who I carried cash around, believe it or not. I mean, it hasn't
yeah,
been that long, but I would take my scholarship check and I would go straight to the bank, and I would just cash it out. I would have the bank give me that amount in cash, and I would take a certain amount of that and I would put it away in like my dresser drawer. And stash some cash in there. And then the rest of it was what I kind of gave to myself as, okay, here's what you can spend this month.
Mhm.
And obviously there were months where I had to dig into that stash.
Yeah,
Uh, but the idea was you pay your rent, you pay your bills, and then here's your spending money.
yeah,
And it wasn't very much, but quite frankly, in college, it didn't need to be very much. I mean, most of our expenses were covered. So,
yep.
but yeah, I can't say that my spending habits were necessarily good in college.
I definitely hear you on that. Um, So if again looking back, what would you say were some of your worst financial decisions you made, and what were some of the best decisions you made?
I mean, I think that
If there were any.
the worst decision, I mean, aside from having a girlfriend in college, I'm just kidding, by the way. The worst decision, I think, like I said, it was going out with my friends and getting a little overzealous.
Yeah.
I don't think I made any, really terrible financial decisions in college that I can remember.
Yeah.
But and I think my best decisions were just trying to have an understanding of here's what I have, here's what I'm able to spend. I was able to save some money in college. I, I felt like like you said, based on the foundation that I received from my parents, I understood the importance of having and saving money. And so I would like to think that comparatively I was pretty good with saving a little bit here and there, and that was probably the thing that I did best. Although again, looking back, it could have been I could have set myself up for the future way better had I really been diligent about it, and really committed myself to some sort of plan or understanding.
Sure, sure. Um, so again, looking back, do you wish you had done some things different in dealing with your money? I mean, I don't know if you were to say necessarily that you wouldn't go out as much, but I mean, are there any things that you have done different looking back on it now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think had I understood kind of you know, how credit cards work. I mean, growing up, I was always of the impression that if you're using a credit card, you're paying interest on it, and
Hmm.
you're paying some lender somewhere.
Right.
It's not your money. But as I've gotten older and really and applied the same principles of not spending what I don't have, you can use credit cards to your advantage,
Yep.
and use them as I mean, if you treat them like a debit card and pay them off monthly, they work for you. And so
Yep.
that's something that I've really grown to love. And I wish it's something that I would have known in college because, it, you know, using cash, using a debit card, if you have the ability to avoid those interest charges, that's a way to basically earn money while you're spending money to some extent. So I would do that. I would change that if I could go back.
I agree wholeheartedly. When I talk to people now and talk to students now, that's one of the things I talk about is just credit and being able to use it efficiently. Because I didn't understand it back then. And just as you just stated, if you use it the right way, it's fantastic. Everything from getting points to just fraud protection. It's just a lot of things if you use it the right way and use it as a tool versus obviously using it and not paying it back, which I did back in college. So no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Um, so how have the habits you formed in college affected life after college, or have they?
I would say that they have. I mean, I would say that I mean, I'm much more literate now, and as far as financially, um, I'm 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 very much I mean, I'm very conscious of my money, my finances. My wife and I mean, I handle all of our finances. I pay all of our bills. I think generally I'm probably a little obsessive about it. I mean, I'm paying credit cards off 3, 4 times a month. I can probably tell you the balance of every credit card and bank account that we have down to like a $5 range, and that's just because again my mom growing up instilled in me kind of the Dave Ramsey philosophy, and not that I'm a Dave Ramsey
Right.
guy, but I've certainly learned to understand the importance of budgeting, and just staying on top of your finances. I mean, in the real world, it's overwhelming. As an adult, you own a house, you own cars, you have various insurance payments, etc. Those things
Mhm.
just they add up, and so having a foundation, having an understanding of how to tackle your finances on a month-to-month basis, um, is something that I really take very seriously. And I think, I guess I wish that a lot that I didn't kind of waste those college years in doing that. I had the foundational principles that I learned as a kid, but then
Uh,
from maybe age 18 to 25, that it was pretty much a plateau there.
yeah.
But I think now I've definitely I've definitely made myself be aware of my finances.
Yeah, this whole thing with this financial literacy for student athletes, you know, and again, the student athletes I do talk to, I definitely want to tell them this up front. It's not a matter of you're not going to get rich, listening to financial literacy. It's all about those habits and creating those habits to shorten that gap. Just like you said, you wish you had learned it sooner. And if I'm able to at least expose student athletes to this a lot sooner than later, they can avoid a lot of the little pitfalls and mistakes that I made, coming through school, and which I would imagine a lot of other student athletes have done as well. So it's just shortening that gap. No different than getting reps on a football field. All you're doing is trying to avoid making mistakes in the game. So using that, I guess, that correlation.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Well, so what are some of the pitfalls that you hope your story could prevent to young student athletes out there? So if you were to essentially talk to young student athletes at K-State or young ladies at K-State, what would you say?
I think the biggest thing is a budgeting, understanding. I think that I don't know what the scholarship checks are during the school year now. I think they're somewhere in the ballpark of $1,300 or $1,400.
Yeah.
In Manhattan, Kansas, your monthly rent isn't going to come anywhere near that. And now different student athletes have different monthly bills. Some are responsible for more, some have maybe some financial support from family. It's important to understand, okay, what amount each month is going out the door for certain. And then from there, you can start to create a budget and hopefully put some money away. Too many times I saw guys get their scholarship checks, and even before going and paying rent, they were going and buying a brand new pair of shoes. They're going and buying a pair of sunglasses or a watch or whatever it may be. And that was always, and not that I can fault anybody who ever did that, because there just wasn't an understanding, but that was always something that I looked at and it kind of shocked me. And it wasn't the student athlete's fault. It was anybody who had guided them along the way. There was no structure in place. And so again, you get a $1,200 check. I mean, it was like $800 when we were in college, but you get that for a second, you feel like you have something, when in reality you don't. And so a lot of times guys would get in really, really tough financial situations because on the first of the month, they felt good. But man, come the 10th or the 20th or the 30th day of the month, money was super tight.
Yeah.
So I would like to see more of a teach, more guidance that informs student athletes as to how they should treat their money.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better. I'm sure everybody has those horror stories of a teammate that's done that, and you look at them and think, wow, at the end of the month, it's gonna really suck.
Absolutely.
So we're kind of towards the end here. I have this little bonus round questions, and which just reading kind of a little bit about you in your bio. So did you have an opportunity to make it to the next level or try out for some teams? And how did that go as far as if you were getting paid, or if you can kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I had a tryout opportunity with the Vikings, and I didn't receive anything beyond a stipend for rookie minicamp. And so I was up there for not more than a week, and then I got hurt, and so that was short lived. So I didn't have to really deal with the kind of the interesting finances that are in play for for guys who go on to the next level. But I do know that for based on communications with guys that I played with, some of my friends who made it to the next level, whether it be the NFL, the CFL, XFL, whatever it is, it's an interesting dynamic, because unlike most areas in life, when you're getting paid 2 weeks a year, 12 months a year, 26 bi-monthly payments a year, the NFL is way different. You're getting paid 17 times a year. You're getting paid maybe more than that if you make it to the NFL, and then there are various bonuses throughout the year. But that large sum of money comes in a short span of time. And so just like we talked about with college kids getting the monthly scholarship checks, a lot of my former teammates have said that pros struggle, and you've seen stories about guys. pros struggle taking, they think their lifestyle applies to the time in which they're getting paid, or is dictated by the time in which they're getting paid, and so they spend like they're making, $2 million every 17 months or every 17 weeks. But in reality, that's $2 million has to spread out over the course of 52 weeks. So the 35 weeks that you're not playing, you got to have money set aside for that. And I think a lot of lay people who aren't familiar with the NFL think, how can those guys go broke? They're making so much money. Well, the system is not necessarily designed to make it easy, I guess you could say.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's powerful that you said that. And that is how a lot of those guys end up, obviously going broke. I mean, you tack on the fact that they get taxed on different states that they play ball in, and it can be a snowball effect. So certainly that's not the best scenario. And so, just talking about after you obviously left K-State, tried out and came back. What are you doing now? I mean, if you can kind of tell the guys that are hopefully listening and watching, what is it that you're doing nowadays?
So I'm an attorney now. I'm an attorney in Kansas City. So after I left K-State, I tried out, I did pro day. Yeah, I did pro day, tried out for the Vikings. And then I thought I wanted to be a football coach. And given that my football career ended in June of 2015, I wasn't able to get on a college staff that fall. So I actually coached high school football in Junction City, Kansas. And quickly into that, I realized I was burnt out on football. I was ready to move on. And so I sat down with my family and we decided that, law school was a good route to pursue. And so I went to law school not knowing really anything about the law or having any sense of direction, and enjoyed it. I find that it's very comparable to sport. It's very competitive, very intense. There's very rigorous, and so from that perspective, I've really, really enjoyed it. And so I was able to get a job at a good law firm in Kansas City. I practice commercial civil litigation, which is a pretty broad area, but basically I handle lawsuits for individual people and small businesses in the civil realm. Basically anything that isn't criminal, that isn't divorce, that isn't bankruptcy. And so it's been a really rewarding career thus far. I really enjoy it, and thankfully our firm does some sports and entertainment law, which gives me, which allows me to kind of get my fix for, as far as sports and stuff go. So.
Absolutely. So that kind of gives us a nice little transition to what we were talking about earlier with name, image, and likeness. And so again, if we have some folks that are listening and watching, if you can kind of talk about name, image, likeness, kind of a really brief statement of what it is and kind of what, from your idea and your thoughts of what's kind of coming down the pipes more or less.
Yeah, so it's so name, image, and likeness is an idea that student athletes can finally benefit off of their name, their image, their likeness. So, student athletes can finally profit off what they have created for themselves and for their institution. And again, I think it's well past due, and I think a lot of others do as well. But this will essentially allow student athletes to earn compensation for things that the general student population can earn compensation for. But for some reason, student athletes have been prohibited from earning compensation for that. And so, you're a football player, you're a quarterback, you have a skill set that people would want to learn from. This will allow you to go out and host camps and make money off of your skill set. It will allow you, if you have 50,000 Twitter followers, to make money putting out tweets. It will allow you to engage with a business and do some promotional stuff for them, and earn some money from that. And so, as we've seen in the past, the money that is essentially generated by student athletes all comes back to the university. All comes back to the athletic department, which, to some extent is not a bad thing. But when you see when you see the NCAA basketball tournament and you see X player showing up on all these commercials and all this footage, and the NCAA and universities, conferences are making millions and millions of dollars, and this student athlete is, he's limited to a scholarship check each month. There's a serious, there is no balance there. There's a serious imbalance of wealth, and for a lot of student athletes, their window in which to earn compensation off of their name, image, and likeness is limited to the time in which they're a college athlete, because most guys don't go on to play at the next level. And so by prohibiting people from earning that compensation, you're essentially keeping student athletes down. I think a lot of people would agree that it's disproportionately affecting Black student athletes, which is a huge problem in and of itself. And so what we have coming down the pipeline is really, at this point, it's a pretty big mess. As you would expect, we have about 6 states who have already enacted their own legislation, which, they're set to go into effect at various times. Florida's law is set to go into effect this July. Others are years down the road. But it has really put the pressure on the NCAA to make something happen. And you have these various states that have these laws going into effect soon that would allow student athletes in their state to earn compensation off their name, image, and likeness. But then you have 44 other states who don't. And so unless the NCAA enacts some uniform legislation, there's going to be a serious shift in the balance of power as far as recruiting and things of that nature go. And so the NCAA is at the point now where there's legislation proposed, it's on the table, and it was supposed to be voted on this week. But because of the change in presidential administration, because of the change in control of the Senate, and because of a case that's currently before the Supreme Court related to student athlete rights, although not completely related to NIL, the NCAA has put pause on their vote. And so it's now we're kind of in a holding pattern. The NCAA is they're trying to work something out with Congress because they want to enact uniform legislation that will preempt all of these individual state laws, and they want some protections as far as antitrust and other things go. And so we're in a really, really sticky situation because there's various legislative proposals on the table in Congress that vary significantly, and I don't know now with the shift in power if the NCAA if some of their demands or some of their wishes are going to be met. And so really the next 4 or 5 months is going to be monumental as far as the student athletes go and as far as their rights go. But I think we can all rest somewhat easily knowing that student athletes are soon going to have some rights that they didn't have previously, which is a huge, huge, huge deal for student athletes. Now, there are some obvious concerns about how this is implemented and how it's enforced and what it truly looks like. But first and foremost, this change, if it's implemented across the board, is a good one. And I'm really, really excited to see where it goes.
So from a student athlete viewpoint, what would they need to really, I guess, be concerned with at this point, or how should they, position themselves, or should they get representation? I mean, how does all that look, or what would you say?
That's one of the biggest kind of catching points at this point is how are the student athletes going to be protected? And we're going to, like we've already seen, K-State has already engaged this company called Open Doors. And other universities have as well. And what Open Doors does is they basically they'll provide agreements. They'll work with companies to make stuff happen. They will kind of serve as a third-party liaison. But the issue is if an issue would arise, how is a student athlete protected? If a student athlete, and it comes back to the same principles we've been discussing as far as financial literacy, but if X company, if a car company or a car dealership pays you $1,000 to do a commercial, as a student athlete, you take that $1,000, you put it in your pocket, you're good, you're out the door.
Yeah.
But now what if something happens where, some legal dispute comes up, any issue arises?
Mm-hmm.
Who's gonna provide assistance to the student athletes? The university is gonna have, they have in-house legal counsel. Open Doors has in-house.
Wow.
What is, so my concern is we're going to be giving these student athletes money, and if there's a clause in the contract that says if you get a DUI, the contract is gone. You're not getting paid. If a student athlete tries to sue or has to deal with any sort of battle over their rights, over the compensation under an agreement, they're going to have to go out and seek legal representation for themselves, which is kind of terrifying, knowing how much legal fees can rack up. I'm concerned that we're doing this, we're putting this out there, but we're not ensuring necessarily the long-term protection of the student athlete. And so my advice would be, if you're a student athlete, get some help, seek some guidance up front, because just like business, just like anything in life, if you seek some sort of guidance from a financial advisor, a marketing person, an attorney, if you seek it up front, you likely won't deal with those issues on the back end. You're gonna take care of them up front. And so being proactive rather than reactive, I think, is something that needs to be stressed to these student athletes, because it's all going to seem good up front, but the minute something goes south, the student athlete's going to be the one on an island. They're going to be the one without a representation to go to and say, here's my problem. So that's one concern that I.
Well, that's a huge concern, and what questions started popping up in my head. A scenario like that, if you have a student athlete who comes from, an inner city, no means, how is he or she going to be able to afford, an attorney to be able to fight for him or her?
Exactly. And if a student athlete from the inner city is sending money home, if it's $1,000, if it's $10,000, if that money if it goes straight home,
Mm-hmm.
in the event that an issue arises and the student athlete needs representation of any sort, there's no money left. And so again, I think the concern is we're helping student athletes in a sense by finally allowing them to benefit from their name, image, and likeness. But at the same time, we're putting the student athlete in a really precarious situation. And again, like we've discussed many times throughout this conversation, these individuals aren't necessarily equipped with an understanding as to how to look at the bigger picture and attack these situations from, with a wider lens. Again, as a student athlete, you and I have both been there. You see that check, you see the dollar amount, that's all that matters. And that, again, is no fault of the student athlete, but we need to make sure that they are being communicated to, they're understanding how to see themselves as an individual business, essentially, how to look at themselves as a proprietor of themselves and of their own business. Until we do that, I'm worried that there will be some issues that really come of this.
You brought up a lot of good points I didn't think about. Wow. Yeah. That's coming right down the pipe here shortly, huh?
Yes. Yeah. It's going to be very real very soon.
I was looking at my notes here, and because I want to be conscious of your time, and just kind of fire a couple more questions at you before I let you go. But one of the questions: how might a receipt of NIL rights impact a foreign player's immigration status? So if you have a player that,
that's a great question, and that, to be honest, that's not something that I've considered. But within that same kind of realm is, how does this impact student athletes in the long term? I think, we saw that push 5 or 6 years ago for unionization of student athletes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are concerned. I mean, a lot of student athletes, I mean, I guess people have differing opinions, but a lot of people are concerned that you start giving the student athlete more rights, then at some point the universities, the institutions, they're going to start pushing for, student athletes to be viewed as employees, and to, and to impose, those kind of the restrictions that you can impose on an employee on the kids. And so that's another, I mean, I know that didn't directly answer your question about immigration, because that's not something I'm really familiar with or have considered, but I have additional concerns about what, if we start treating these student athletes like employees, or and forcing them to unionize, we get into a situation that I don't think a lot of student athletes want to be a part of. I wouldn't have wanted to be a part of it. You're late for a workout, here's $1,000 fine. You missed 3 workouts, you're gone. And so, how do we, because in my mind, and I know amateurism is a really, it's a difficult word. It's a sticking point for a lot of people. In my mind, I protect the amateurism that I think ultimately protects a student athlete, while giving them additional rights, while allowing them to benefit. And so I just hope that we're able to keep a balance, to let these kids earn money that is rightfully theirs, but to protect them, to treat them like a student athlete, to understand that they are 18 to 22 years old, that they don't know a lot about the real world. They don't know, these aren't kids who, these aren't kids who necessarily have had a lot of structure in their past. And the collegiate athlete experience is the first form of structure that a lot of them have had. And so if you essentially throw them to the wolves,
Yeah.
I worry that could be a huge problem.
Yeah, it can. Definitely can. Well, listen, I mentioned a couple of questions, but I definitely, like I said, want to be conscious of your time. Maybe we can pick this up a little bit later as well, but you definitely brought a lot of good points that I think is very important. A lot of student athletes, hope that are watching this, will have to really listen to and start to kind of, at least with them being exposed to it, at least gets that idea and information out there a little bit more. So I appreciate you for that. But yeah, man, thanks for your time. I mean, if there's anything else you want to kind of say real quick, or if you're good to go, or.
No, I mean, if any student athletes are listening, I'm more than happy to listen to any questions you might have, or to talk through anything with you. I'm a huge proponent of a student athlete, and am willing to, impart any sort of wisdom or anything on them that I can that may help them. And so if anybody out there is listening, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to talk with you about whatever it may be.
Cool. And I'll put your contact information there on the channel as well, so that they'll be able to contact you directly. But Curry, man, I appreciate your time, brother.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's good to meet you. Good to talk with you. We'll have to do this again soon.
Definitely, man. You take care of yourself.
Hey, you do the same. Stay safe.
Yes, sir. You too.